Thank you for that, Prof. Good afternoon, everyone. Reverend Francis and the Meadowbrook United Church, Mrs. Lyew-Ayee and the organizing committee, friends and family who gathered here this afternoon. But thank you for being here. Good to see so many friends, Reverend Dick, Bishop Thompson, Auntie Elsie and Uncle John. Good to see a lot of familiar faces here. I want to begin by congratulating the organizing committee for choosing a topic like this and choosing someone like me to talk about this. When I noticed a couple of years ago, 2008, that Easton Lee presented, so I'm not the first Chinese person to listen to this. That's fine. My own connection to the Emancipation is a little bit tenuous, but I'm a little bit better connected to the youth and technology dimensions here. What is interesting is that we are looking at a period in history now where the convergence of youth and technology have really resulted in very significant societal change across the world. We must remember that there have always been youth, there's always been technology, just that the youth become old and the technology becomes obsolete. The youth get replaced by new youth and the old technology get replaced by new technology. But I'm not that out of touch with history, because one of the first, well, I didn't do history for O levels, but I did for A levels for fun. And is Miss Virgo here? Miss Valerie Virgo, she terrorized me, but she taught me West Indian history. I did history to do European history, and you know, the French Revolution where they get people's head chopped off and stuff like that. But I had to do British West Indian history, so I learned things like emancipation, apprenticeship, amelioration, all those things, and it was very important. As I began my professional career, Professor Bernard Satchel, who also gave one of his lectures, Professor Satchel there? Professor Satchel grabbed me and said, we need to do some maps, because he's preparing a book called Hope Transformed, and he needs to map some 19th century. You know, these yellow, orange maps that are falling apart in your hand, you want me to connect them together. I've done some work with Dr. Ivor Connolly in looking at Tainos across Jamaica, mapping the locations and predicting where all the Taino settlements may be. So we use a lot of GPS and satellite imaging to figure that out. But Professor Satchel also put me to work on the 1843 Foundry Fire in downtown Kingston. That was interesting to me, because to me, I'm tracking 1692 Port Royal earthquake, which led to the formation of the city of Kingston. And then of course I look at the 1907 Kingston earthquake, which also had a fire. I didn't realize that there was an 1843 significant fire event in Kingston as well, so I got dragged into that from the History and Archaeology Department. And right now we are still involved with the Archaeology Department in terms of mapping and using GPS total station surveying of archaeological sites. But specifically to emancipation, about 10 years or so ago, the National Library asked me to map all the sugar estates across western Jamaica and to isolate those that were connected to the Sam Sharp Rebellion. What we're seeing on the map right now is every single estate that was existing in 1831. You can probably barely see it. But what you also notice are the estates that had an incident, fire or riot, and an estate that had some death associated, whether slaves were killed or landowners were killed, and so on. But that's not the interesting part. What was interesting is how we're able to connect then to now using satellite imagery. There are a lot of people living in Westmoreland, Hanover, St. Elizabeth, St. James, who are living on top of old sugar estates, historical events, historical locations in their own right. And so we're all connected to a part of this history and a part of this struggle that we talk about with the Emancipation commemoration. But you can't have a geologist here at LC and not learn a little bit of geology. So if we want to talk about the entire, before there was history, there was prehistory. And so the entire 4.6 billion years that the planet has existed, modern humans have only existed in the last 0.1 second of the hour. If you were to take 4.6 billion years into 1 hour, 60 minutes. Modern humans have only existed in the last 0.1 seconds of the hour. And that gives us a sense of how much we've done in a very little amount of time. On the right, you're going to see the different geological epochs. You've heard of the Jurassic and those types of periods. We're now in what modern scientists call the Anthropocene. For the first time in human history, mankind has the ability to shape the destiny of the planet for better or for worse. We can actually shoot out missiles, asteroids or potential comet impact. We can do something about climate, but we can also destroy it by nuclear weapons and all the other bad stuff that we're prone to do. But that gives us a sense of where we are right now. But human history, stuck in time. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Technical difficulties, imagine. But what has happened, I mean, I can remember what I wrote, right? What is important is that throughout human history, and it's important now, we have, when I mentioned youth and technology, there we go, we started with the Stone Age. We're using technology. Technology is literally the practical application of knowledge. The human brain is the most complex thing in the universe, right? The ability to conceive of things. One of the defining characteristics of being human is not the ability to eat or reproduce or whatever, it is curiosity. And so for the entire extent and period of human history, we've been curious. We've been trying to figure out what can we do with whatever. Inventing or controlling fire, the wheel, and then developing weapons and civilization, all these things happen. But about 400 or so years ago, with what we're calling the Industrial Revolution, we began for the first time using mechanized power. For the first time, we're not using animal power. So whether it's donkey, mule, horse, elephant, camel, anything like that, our slaves were now using water or steam. And that led to the second industrial revolution. Next slide, please. The second industrial revolution, which is really mechanization, automation of mass production. So Henry Ford, we started using electricity a lot more, so Thomas Edison. All of a sudden, we started having a different level of industrial productivity, industrial output. Societies were becoming more urban. People were leaving their fields, coming to towns to work in factories and associated industry. And then that led to about 70 or so years ago to the development and advent of computers and automation, which then lead to the current age that we're in, which is the fourth industrial revolution, where we're looking at connected physical and cyber systems. We're talking about devices talking to each other. We're talking about devices that are controlling other devices, and so on. So that's where we are right now. How many of us in this room are under the age of 35? Right? How many in this room are under the age of 25? And again, different definitions of what we're calling youth. But we have different, like I said, there are different youths over different generations, and we define generations differently. We have seen what's called the greatest generation, that's the World War II era. The greatest generation are not just the soldiers, but also the roads and the riveters who are helping the production back at home, the people who are rationing food, the people who are supporting the war effort even though they weren't in the war, are part of the greatest generation. But then that led to the baby boomers who came back from the war that presented a very seismic shift in how urban societies developed. Now all of a sudden we started seeing suburbanization of societies. We started seeing the development of the interstates and the shopping mall. All of these things developed during the baby boomer period. And then you had the Generation X, the rebels, the people who were counterculture, people protesting the war, civil rights, all of these things were going on with Generation X. Generation Y, MTV, rock and roll, and all this kind of stuff, but also the influences of drugs and all these things start to really manifest themselves badly with Generation Y, and we have these millennials right here. I mean, you have an entire set of people who can make millions and millions of dollars like the Kardashians doing God knows what, right? But you can pretty much just take a everybody takes a selfie nowadays, so I'm just going to take a selfie with you. So I think that's the first time, Sean, that anybody in the Emancipation Lecture has taken a selfie during the lecture. But you beg for it. I put it on my Instagram, but you can hit me up later for that. But the point is that you have different attention spans and different types of tools that, Reverend Francis, distract your flock. People are going to be more enamored with the flashy iPhone. Do you realize that Christopher Mann was doing his poetry off a phone? Yes. And Sharon was reading her thing off an iPad? Yes. Right? So we're talking about a very different set of people right now. And the same technology that you are praising in terms of what it can do can also very easily distract your way from this thing right here. So we have to be very careful about that. These are the top downloaded apps in the world and the top downloaded apps in Jamaica. And you can see how many of them are social media apps as opposed to productivity apps. And then we begin to realize that this is the fourth industrial revolution. This is what's happening right now. Nobody is building the internet. The internet has always been built. But you create an entire new world, an entire new virtual, digital world in which we're playing. So once upon a time, humans needed food, shelter, companionship. When there's a blackout right now, I don't scream because I got TV, I don't scream because I got Wi-Fi. And then, the battery run out. You see this with the congregation of people at airports huddled around the two plugs that they have available for you to charge your phones. Then enterprising people set up digital charging stations, which are nothing more than a plug for you to suck onto. You have all of these things. It's a new world. People become so attached to their devices and attached to their connectivities that when you don't have it, it's a human rights violation. So when we talk about youth, we need to put youth into context. Remember, youth become old people and old people create more youth. In developed countries, you have demographic characteristics similar to what you're seeing there. On the left is the United States, on the right is Japan. You can see that the bulges are further up. It's not a traditional pyramid. When you look at the characteristics of developing countries, Jamaica is on the left, Ghana is on the right. Jamaica has a bulge around 15 to 25-year-old. So you have a lot of people in that age group. Fewer of the 0 to 5 to 10 age group and so on. Ghana has a lot more 0 to 5s than 15 to 25s. That's also the pattern in Saudi Arabia and other countries where you have a serious issue in dealing with how to deal with young people as they grow older. Services while they're young, employment when they get older in a few years' time, you need to begin planning for these things. Jamaica has had that kind of a pattern consistently for the last several years in terms of a bulge between 15 and 25 and so on. The concentration of Jamaican young people are typically in rural areas and in the West. So previously that was the 0 to 25, so under the 25 age group. And this is the 15 to 25 age group. So that is the definition of young people according to the United Nations. Below 15 you're called a child. But anyway, that's where they are. In Jamaica, St. James has a lot of young people, and then we talk about scamming later on, but I mean, I'm not connecting the two. But we do have high concentration of young people in St. James and in the West. And in terms of the concentration of people between the ages of 15 and 24, again, St. James pops up. But number 2 is Mona Heights, so big surprise. But you have to understand the nature and distribution. You can't simply say Jamaica, you can't simply say Kingston. You have to break it down further in terms of delivering proper services to your flock, your congregations, and to your constituents, or whoever you want to call it. But technology is a powerful wealth enabler. You do not need to be royalty to become rich. You do not need to have a lot of land or to be involved in real estate developments to be rich. You don't need to be in the oil industry. You don't need to do anything that traditional wealth generation. But you do have the ability to become richer than royalty. You have the ability to become richer than these landed aristocrats or whoever. But if you look on the right, when you look at the iconic tech characters of Zuckerberg, Jobs, and Gates, all of them left school. So, that has very serious implications on people's willingness to see education through. And as you're going to see later on, education has a very important role in grounding the individual in what they're going to do. Right? Consider Jobs, Zuckerberg, and Gates to be the aberrations and not the norm. But these are who people aspire to be. People are inspired by technology. They want it, they like it. It is flashy and shiny. It is the typical textbook thing that it is the lollipop to kids that young people will always gravitate towards. Now this list has changed in the last 3 days because Bezos is now #1. But what is consistent is that the top 10 richest men in the world are all white men. But you are talking about 6 of the 10 are in tech. Oh, yeah. 6 of the 10 are in technology. So again, that tells us where the world is headed. And by tech, I'm also talking telecommunication, anything related to the digital realm. But when you look at this kind of pattern, we have to understand the pathway that technology offers to extreme wealth. And there are lots of opportunities. There are lots of startups, startup incubators, there are lots of angel investors, there are lots of tech boot camps that we see all over the media and all over the place. Lots of people are enrolling themselves in these programs, all with the dream of becoming wealthy. You do have programs like the Learning Networks, which is connected to the Violence Prevention Alliance, that aims to get kids off the streets between the times of 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 6 o'clock, where you can be doing homework and so on. You have other kinds of programs, the tablets in schools. Programs allow children to become, young people to be involved in and familiarizing themselves with the curriculum on a tablet, so they become more comfortable with these kinds of technologies. We're still having technical difficulties. But one of the things that we're able and we want to do with, we have computer labs in prisons. These are all designed to get people comfortable with the technology. Once you're comfortable, we let your creativity take over from there. And that's the thing that we're going to be very heavily invested in going forward as a country using technology. You want to just manually control the slides? I have no idea what the next slide is. I tried to use my own computer, but my computer looks like you. It's a Catholic computer. But there we go. Same technologies to build new technology. You don't need to be an engineer. You don't need to be or supported by an extreme apparatus or something like Bell Labs to create something that's going to be world changing. Who knew that we ever needed an Uber? Or who knew that we ever needed Snapchat? And all these things are just raking in millions and millions of dollars. Things that we never knew, but have changed our lives no matter what. Henry Ford said at the beginning of the 20th century, somebody asked him, if somebody asked what would they do to improve transportation, they would have invented a faster horse. So, you have to change the game and be willing to change the game and so on. So, with all this stuff, from a boombox to hardware stuff I don't even know, typewriter, all the other old people stuff, and now stuff into a cell phone, right? And so now you miniaturize all the technology, cameras, all that stuff is into a cell phone. How many people actually use their cell phone to call people nowadays? Right? But then a lot, oh, you're showing your age there. But the thing is that by having all this in a single device that fits in your pocket, people can figure out things to do with it. That's when the entrepreneurship gene kicks in. But there still remain a lot of challenges, okay? We have challenges with access to capital, getting financing for your projects. We talk about your attitude to business. All of these things have to be properly addressed in terms of getting your world-changing solution ready for the market. We talk about market readiness, just-in-time versus just-in-case technological development. We have regulatory obstacles. Regulatory obstacles you can have something ready, but anything ranging from mobile money and all these things require, obviously, regulatory approval, but it also requires the regulators themselves to have that vision, that transformative vision for society that this technology is going to bring. But there are social challenges, and this is the focus of my presentation. We have the risk of failure. Risk of failure is always present, but we must remember that some of the setup for technology is relatively cheap. It's very easy to mass produce, very easy to distribute technology like furniture, and therefore your failure isn't as extreme as if you were to sink all your savings in cash plus, but that's another issue. Now, we in tech world, we always encourage people to challenge norms and in the status quo and to be revolutionary. This is something we romanticize in the tech world. It's something that again appeals to young people who want to come in. This is the basis of the Apple campaign in the 1980s. I don't like that rainbow colored apple, but it's still a very important tool nonetheless. So we have the risks of unintended consequences. We have the risks of reaching alienated and disaffected youth. Now this can be a good thing. We can reach alienated and disaffected youth, but if the wrong person reaches them first using the same technology, we have problems. We have the romanticism of struggles. Those bastards at the bottom left is ISIS, and they have leveraged technology to get to disaffected young people. They have perverted religion for their own purposes. But even so, a few years ago, the person of the year for Time magazine was the protester. This is in the wake of the Arab Spring. Again, an emancipation struggle against oppression. But we're talking about, so far, can we determine whether or not it has been a success? Or it could be said really has achieved democratic status since the Arab Spring. Even theirs is tenuous. Libya is still disarray. Egypt went democratic and has now gone back to a different version of Mubarak. And Syria is just hopeless right now. So we have to talk about whether or not the struggle and the results. We have to look at the role of technology and how what role we play in all of that later on. Now, in terms of romanticism and romanticizing the revolutionary, somebody who can turn things upside down and change the world, and we can disintermediate. We don't need to go through the media. We can talk directly to the people in the way that all these social media platforms do. People who change the world. And we get this guy. Yeah, we can do this, but who isn't in that world? Right? We want to be able to know what it is that we're celebrating. Technology has good and bad associated with it. The challenges, the societal challenges, which is the focus of my presentation, have many different dimensions to it. Some of them are benign, some of them are malevolent, and some of them are in between. Some of them have nothing to do with any social impact, but there are ethical concerns and privacy concerns connected to it. So for example, antisocial behavior is a very real issue. People begin to dissociate themselves with another human being, a physical, flesh and blood human being, because they're more used to avatars and emojis nowadays. We also have very difficult interpersonal attitudes. One of the reasons you have these kinds of shootings in the United States, school shootings in the United States, is not so much, yes, it has a lot to do with guns, but the fact is that when young people believe that when you kill somebody, that person just resets to level 12, and they can continue the game afterwards. That is something that we have to understand. Distractions are also really one of the reasons, one of the blessed reasons, Professor, that I don't teach anymore is that I don't have students who are looking at their phones while I'm trying to explain something very difficult. It's very annoying to disrespect. I'm on strike. But anyway, we have issues of malignant behavior. So we have cyberbullying, and cyberbullying does have real-world implications. There's a very famous case just happened in the United States where a young lady was convicted for manslaughter for encouraging her boyfriend to kill himself. We do have scamming, and I'm going to talk about scamming in a few minutes. And we also have terrorism. We also have the scourge of fake news, and I'm going to talk about it in a few minutes as well. We have issues of ethics and privacy. Now, distractions are really, really annoying. They are annoying. I mean, even if you go to the movies and somebody's checking their Facebook during a movie, I mean, come on. It's across all societies we have this issue of very short attention span. A few years ago, kids would be playing in the park, and all of a sudden kids are in the park on their phones talking to each other on their phones. And you know, that has real world implications in terms of socializing people when they're grown up. Right? So I don't know, you guys are talking to each other right now. Put the phone down and pay attention. Now this is an actual example. This is a picture of the Meadowbrook Marsh that has been flooded. During Hurricane Matthew, I was in the Situation Room at the National Works Agency, and this thing was being posted saying, do not go onto Meadowbrook Marsh. Meadowbrook Marsh is flooded. That picture was taken in August 2012. Right? So that picture was circulating on social media. And we've seen a lot of cases in Jamaica where a lot of social or fake news have been circulated via social media. It is very annoying, it is very dangerous, because when you have to divert resources to respond to stuff like this, you end up getting resources taken away from where they're actually needed. So we tend to, because it has a famous picture and a quote, we quote it and stuff, and I'm doing that right now. But we have to use our common sense. We don't leave our common sense aside just because social media tells you something. Now, scamming. I call it a new enslaver. People try to rationalize it as reparations, but it's not. Two wrongs do not make a right. A lot of people, including some churches in Western Jamaica, benefited from scamming, and the effects are seen, we're seeing it right now. We go through these phases. The Jamaicans and drug smuggling, and Jamaicans and cash plus bullying, and now Jamaicans and scamming. Every single one of them is a product of our innate Jamaican entrepreneurial spirit. Right? Everything is connected, good and bad. We tend to just do the bad and do business with the good. Imagine if we use our powers for good. But there are many secondary beneficiaries. Car sales places, everybody buying a BMW, right? Luxury watches and stuff, real estate, people are benefiting from this influx of scamming cash. But this violates that spirit of the struggle, right? In a study done last year of major hemispheric cities, Kingston is the only major city in the Western Hemisphere, the capital city in the Western Hemisphere that has a lower murder rate than the national average. That's because the national average of crime in Jamaica has been shifted west. The pattern in Montego Bay is terrible. I'm going to show you the pattern in a few minutes. The pattern is random. Kingston's crime pattern are very predictable. Downtown Kingston, West Kingston, and just south, with the little pockets of Mountain View, probably even Grandstand fall off. Right? But it's predictable. Montego Bay is random. But the worst part of it, and this is being quantified and measured by digital technology here, and what you see there is a 3D model of flankers. Montego Bay has a physical profile as it relates to policing that is similar to Papine, not West Kingston, not Spanish Town, not Maypen. So a Corolla cannot patrol those roads. These roads are prone to ambush very easily. We're going to have to look at it very differently. And from the point of view of, God forbid, if something bad happens in Montego Bay, and in the 1950s there was an earthquake in Montego Bay, if something happened and these houses collapse and these people are now on the streets, you're looking at a really bad situation in the case of Montego Bay. The overall pattern of crime in Montego Bay is random. This is all of 2016. This is first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. You can see the Montego Bay metropolitan area is just one blob. In the case of Kingston, it is downtown Kingston and West Kingston that consistently have a red blob. When we look at the ethical issues associated with technology, we're looking at the sweatshop condition in which our technology is built. Now, in the age when people want cheaper phones and in the age where shareholders want greater return, you're going to have to drive down costs. And in order to drive down costs, you're going to squeeze everything out of the production line. And as a result, you do have issues associated with sweatshops. You also have issues associated with data privacy. Data privacy once used to be a commercial economic issue, Target, or the PlayStation hack or whatever, the release of credit card information. But increasingly we're seeing where issues of privacy become geopolitical, as is the case right now with Russia, and in the case with a few years ago with the Sony hack and North Korea. So I put out a fairly, controversial equivalency, comparing the Civil War struggles in the United States in the mid-19th century and the current issue associated with climate change and the coal industry. In the 19th century, you're looking at cotton production using slave labor, which is a dying industry. The British West Indies have already emancipated their slaves. Brazil still had a few more decades to go, but slavery was on its way out. The role of the church could not be ignored anymore. The nonconformists, all these guys were changing the game as it relates to the use of human power in production. Fast forward 200 years and we're looking at trying to save dying industry, which is the coal industry. The key thing here is not an environmental issue that I'm pitching to you right now, it's an economic industry. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars worth of innovations in green tech that are available that we're leaving on the table because we refuse to look at this new generation of technology. You want to make America great again? That's what you invest in, not try to prop up a bad industry. So you want to be on the right side of history? Wake up. But we're looking at an issue where I am seeing some very similar dying breaths. And when we look at technology, this is downtown Kingston. But what we did here was we simulated what downtown Kingston would look like in 100 years' time, and there is a waterfront covered by water. This is the waterfront covered by the same models used by IPCC for the what the sea level rise would look like. This is not to scare anybody, but this is to tell you what to expect. Therefore, you know what to do. This is not something that is, where did this come from? How could this have happened? It is very easy for scientists to also show you, hey look, downtown Kingston is flooded. Downtown Kingston is flooded to your ankles. Okay, so we need to engineer a solution. Nobody's going to drown in that. But we are talking about a destruction of an area that we need to do something. So in concluding, we have to realize that the emancipation struggle is far from over. It never ended until 1834. Young people become old people who create young people. Technology becomes obsolete, which gets replaced by new technology. The emancipation struggle never ended, it evolved. Right? We're talking about anything ranging from Black Lives Matter to all of these other issues that are the continuing struggles in the Middle East. These struggles continue. We have issues within the United States of cyberbullying and all these things going on. These things are not necessarily the big issues that we see in the news, but affecting individual lives every day. But the fact of the matter is that technology is not the solution. You are the solution. The church is the solution. Instilling morals, ethics, and values in the people that will be using the technology. But the church is not the mommy and your daddy. I have a good mommy and a good daddy, but not a lot of people do. Right? There's individual responsibility, there's collective responsibility that's required. But throughout Western civilization, the role of the church in instilling moral values across the world is undeniable. And so what we have to understand is that you can have a very fast car, and you give that car to a racing driver who's trained, and you give that fast car to one of these guys here who don't have a driver's license yet. But you like it, right? You like it, right? But can you handle a Ferrari? Exactly. He's honest. You see him in a church, but he's honest. And he's not drunk. You're not drunk, right? Okay. But what happens is that it's the same car. The technology is the car. The role of the church, the role of family is going to be extremely important in doing this. Technology is not good. Technology is not bad. Humans are. So, final thoughts. Can technology enslave or liberate? People say, oh boy, technology, I don't have to be at the office anymore, I can work from home, I'm free. Or all these young kids are just glued to their devices now. The poor things will never know how to play football or what sunshine feels like. But the answer is none of the above. It's both. Right? So we have to understand that. Anybody thought I was going to say this? Bring up the slide and you get 10 points right now. I mean, this I wasn't even playing before I came in. But, I mean, this is pretty much the only Bob Marley line I know other than One Love. But the fact is that if we need to emancipate from ourselves from mental slavery, means that we're still in slavery. And we have to understand that reality. The struggle continues. We all have a role, in a different role. As parents or as kids, we need to do something about it. Thank you all very much.